Imagine a powerful nation decides to stop a competitor from advancing in a key technology. It restricts access to tools, software, and materials. It cuts off supply chains. The goal is to maintain dominance. But what if this strategy backfires? What if the restrictions, instead of stopping the competitor, force him to innovate faster and build an entirely self-sufficient system that ends up challenging the dominant power's position? Welcome to my channel, China and the World. I'm Meng, your host. I bring you fascinating developments about China and the world. If you like what I bring you, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to all. This is the story of the global semiconductor industry in 2026. For years, the United States has used export controls to limit China's access to advanced chip technology. The goal was to slow down China's technological rise, particularly in areas like AI and supercomputing. However, recent developments suggest that this strategy may have had the opposite effect. China has responded not by giving up, but by accelerating its push for self-reliance. The result is an endgame where US chip hegemony is facing a powerful backlash. Today, we will explore this situation in details. We will look at how US restrictions have evolved, how China has built a domestic chip ecosystem, and the new paths Chinese companies like Huawei are forging to leapfrog traditional technological barriers. This is the story how the semiconductor world is splitting in two, and what it means for the future of global technology. Let's begin by understanding the initial strategy. Starting around 2019 and intensifying in 2022, the US implemented a series of export controls. These rules targeted not just American companies, but also any company worldwide that use American technology or equipment. This includes the world's leading chip makers in Taiwan and South Korea. The controls prevented these companies from selling advanced chips and chip-making equipment to Chinese entities. The US also put major Chinese tech companies like Huawei and SMIC on its entity list. This meant they could not buy certain American components without a special license. The official justification was national security. The US argued that advanced chips could be used by the Chinese military. However, China viewed this as an economic coercion and technological bullying. They saw it as an attempt to stifle their legitimate economic development. This is where the boomerang effect comes in. In the short term, the restrictions worked. China could not access the most advanced processors from TSMC or buy the latest NVIDIA AI chips. This created a significant challenge. But in the long term, it created an enormous incentive for China to solve the problem on its own, and it created a huge domestic market for China when the US suppliers stopped exporting to China. The Chinese government and private companies began investing billions of dollars into building a domestic semiconductor ecosystem. This is not just about making chips, it is about making equipment, the materials, and the software to design them. This push for self-reliance has become a core national strategy. The goal is to create what is called a closed loop or full chain where China can design and produce chips without relying on any foreign technology. This determination is the foundation of the endgame we are now witnessing. The most immediate challenge for China was securing the basic materials for chip making. The most critical of these is the silicon wafer. A silicon wafer is a thin, flat disk that serves as the base on which chips are built. For years, China relied heavily on imported wafers, especially the larger and more advanced 12-inch variety used for most modern chips. To address this, China's semiconductor industry has been aggressively ramping up local production. Recent reports indicate a major target has been set. By the end of 2026, Chinese chip makers are expected to get more than 70% of their 12-inch silicon wafers from domestic sources. This is an ambitious goal. To put it in perspective, just a few years ago, Chinese wafer makers had a global capacity share of only 3%. By 2025, that share had jumped to around 28% and is expected to reach 32% in 2026. This growth is driven by major Chinese companies. For example, Xi'an's S-Wing Material Technology, a leading wafer producer, had a combined monthly capacity of over 1,200,000 wafers and is expanding further. Other players like National Silicon Industry Group are also scaling up. The goal is not just about quantity, but about quality and self-sufficiency in the supply chain. If Chinese chip makers can get most of their fundamental material from local suppliers, they become much less vulnerable to foreign export controls. This is a classic move of supply chain de-risking. Securing the supply chain for materials is one thing, but the real test is chip design and manufacturing. This is where Huawei has made a stunning announcement that is shaking up the industry. For over 6 decades, the semiconductor industry has been driven by Moore's law. This was the observation that the number of transistors on a chip doubles about every 2 years. To keep this pace, we had to make transistors smaller and smaller. This is called geometric scaling. However, this path has become incredibly difficult and expensive. Transistors are now measured in a few nanometers. Building a factory for the most advanced processes can cost tens of billions of dollars. And for Huawei, the path was completely blocked because it cannot access the most advanced manufacturing equipment. Huawei's response is a new way of thinking. In May 2026, at the IEEE International Symposium on Circuits and Systems in Shanghai, Huawei Semiconductor chief introduced the tau scaling law. The name tau comes from a Greek letter used in physics to represent time. The core idea is to shift the focus from making transistors smaller to making information move faster. Imagine a traditional chip as a single-story building. To fit more people, you have to make people smaller. That is Moore's law. Huawei's approach, which is called logic folding, is like building a skyscraper. You stack the circuits vertically. This increases transistor density and improves performance without making individual transistors any smaller. They say it delivers 55% higher transistor density and 41% better power efficiency than conventional designs. They have already mass-produced 381 chips using this principle. The first flagship Kirin chip, which will be in Huawei's next smartphone, is set to fully adopt logic folding later this year. Looking further ahead, Huawei projects that by 2031, high-end chips designed under this new law will achieve transistor densities equivalent to those of a 1.4 nanometer process. To put that in perspective, TSMC is currently targeting that level for 2028. The gap, in other words, is now measured in years, not decades. It is a clear sign that China is not just catching up on the old path, but is trying to build an entirely new one. The wafer self-sufficiency goal and Huawei's tau scaling law is just two parts of a much larger strategy. The overall vision for China is to create a complete closed-loop semiconductor ecosystem that can operate independently from the West. This ecosystem needs many parts to function. It starts with the basic research and development of new materials. For instance, researchers in Beijing University recently announced a new type of two-dimensional transistor made from novel materials. They claim it operates 40% faster than TSMC's 3nm devices while consuming less energy. The ecosystem also includes the manufacturing and design of its specialized chips. We are seeing rapid advancement in areas like photonic chips, which use light instead of electricity to process information. These are seen as a future path for high-performance, low-power computing. Another critical piece is the financial system to fund these companies. In 2026, we are seeing a wave of semiconductor-related initial public offerings on China's stock market. In just a few weeks, companies specialized in AI chips, silicon photonics, and storage controllers have filed for or cleared IPOs, aiming to raise significant capital. The government is also supporting this by extending listing standards to even more hard-tech sectors like quantum technology and embodied intelligence. This is not just about catching up. It is about building a parallel system. A system where Chinese companies design chips with Chinese software, manufacture them with Chinese-made equipment on Chinese-made wafers, and then sell them to Chinese companies building domestic AI models and data centers. As one analyst noted, the US approach lacked legitimacy and rationality, and its implementation would make all countries in the semiconductor industry chain losers. The Chinese technology is to ensure that it is not a loser and to potentially become a leader in its own right. The combined effect of these trends is a global semiconductor market that is splitting in two. On one side, you have the traditional system led by the US and its allies. This system excels as the most advanced physical manufacturing nodes, like 2nm or 3nm. It has a deep ecosystem of software and proven supply chains. It is a system used by major global players like Apple, Nvidia, and AMD, and yet it is also becoming more restricted and expensive. On the other side, you have the developing Chinese system. This system is focusing on architectural innovation, advanced packaging, and making the most of the mature manufacturing nodes it can access. It is rapidly building its own supply chain for materials and equipment. The goal is not to outcompete the US system on its own terms in every segment, but to create a viable alternative for the massive Chinese market and other countries. Building a globally competitive chip industry is one of the most difficult technological challenges in history. In early 2026, the US revised its licensing policy to allow the export of NVIDIA H200 and similar chips to approved customers in China on a case-by-case basis. This shows the US is trying to manage the situation by allowing sales for certain applications while still blocking the most advanced manufacturing tools. However, it also reflects a recognition that a total ban was not sustainable and was harming US companies. Despite the US permitting such export, the Chinese are refraining from purchasing any more US supplies. The endgame is not a single event, but a new reality. The era of a unified semiconductor industry dominated by a single country is ending. We are moving into an era of strategic competition and parallel supply chains. In conclusion, the situation in 2026 can be seen as a pivotal moment. The US strategy of containment has in many ways backfired. It accelerated China's efforts to build a self-sufficient semiconductor ecosystem and to reject buying any more US supplies. China's push to have 70% of its 12-inch silicon wafers made domestically show a real-world progress in the supply chain. Huawei's introduction of the tile scaling law and its logic folding technology is a bold attempt to solve the performance puzzle through a new approach. The wave of IPOs in China's semiconductor sector is fueling this innovation with capital. This is not just about chips, it is about who will shape the technological future. It is about which country will lead in AI, autonomous vehicles, advanced manufacturing, and everything else that depends on computing power. It is about who will set the new rules for the next era of innovation. The semiconductor industry is transforming from a global network into a more fragmented, competitive landscape for people and businesses around the world. This means there may be two different paths for technology development. The results of this competition will be felt for decades. What do you think? Is the US strategy working? Is China's closed-loop ecosystem viable? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching this deep dive on China and the World channel. If you found this analysis valuable, please like and subscribe. We will continue to follow this rapidly evolving story and bring you the latest updates. See you in the next video.